Yes. We are back. We are live. We're recording. I have my next guest. I'm super excited. But before I start, I want to mention this episode is recorded in July. So I think training camp is 2-3 days in. So if any breaking news comes out after we've recorded this, we obviously will not talk about it. So give us a break. But I just want to, Daniel's here. I'll let him introduce himself. But for those of you that don't know, because I don't know what episode's going to go first, I decided to do a cool series and talk to people that are creating content around the teams that I support. So I don't like big media. I think this is the new wave of media. I think we know more about our team than big media does. And so why not lean into learning more about your team through people that are, I don't want to say obsessed, but almost obsessed with their teams. And so that is why I'm doing this. So without further ado, I will let Daniel introduce himself, and then we will talk all things Steelers.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. I'm Daniel J. From State of the Steelers YouTube channel, also part of the Steel Curtain Network. We're on audio and YouTube based as well. I also have another podcast that I do, but it's not related to the Steelers. So, but I appreciate you guys having me, appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And so one of the things I like to start with, just because I feel like it gives everybody a better understanding, is what made you become a Steelers fan, and how did you get into creating content specifically for the Steelers?
Well, from how I became a fan kind of goes back to my father. I was born into it, but my dad, being from Texas, and in the 70s, it was the Steelers versus the Cowboys. And being from Texas,
Yes.
everybody's a Cowboys fan. But that was the, go against the grain kind of fellow there, and decided to be the Steelers fan. And, I was basically born with a pigskin in my hand. I love football, grew up loving football, love the Steelers since I can remember. And, I've just been a huge fan of them. And when it came to creating content, I used to be a huge fan of, well, it's called Steel Curtain Network now, but it used to be called Behind the Steel Curtain. We used to be a part of SB Nation. Well, I reached out to Dave Schofield, who's the editor of Steel Curtain Network, and the reason why I reached out to him was because he was a season ticket holder. I was interested in becoming a season ticket holder, and so me and him had a correspondence of emails, and which ended up with me actually purchasing a couple of season tickets. I ended up going to a game where he was at, and then after the game, it was the Steelers versus Broncos a couple of years back. I think it was like 2019, maybe 21, somewhere around there. And I ended up coming out on the Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube show after the game. He put me on there, and so I was excited about it. I got the itch to do the podcast, so to speak. So I started my own podcast. I called State of the Steelers. And it started to move a little bit. It started going in the right direction. This was in 2022. And I ended up having Dave on the channel. I asked him if he would join. He had no idea I'd created a channel at that point. He was impressed with what I was able to do, and they signed me on. And so I just kind of just creating content on my own and through them about the Pittsburgh Steelers ever since.
I love that. That's awesome. Becoming a season's ticket holder, I heard, for the Steelers can be a daunting task unless you know somebody that knows somebody that might know somebody. So.
Yes, but there's also another way. You can go through the licensing. So there's like a classified ads sort of, on the Steelers website for those that want to sell their licensing. And I ended up purchasing the licensing for my tickets at an amazing deal. I got the I got my tickets during the COVID season, so nobody was playing in Pittsburgh, so some folks were selling their tickets pretty cheap. Because if you don't purchase your season tickets that year, you end up losing the license, and it goes to whoever's next in line on the waiting list. So some of these guys, what they were doing, or gals, what they were doing is that they were putting their season tickets on this website, and I was able to get one or get two tickets at probably the cost of half of one.
I love that.
And so I've had my season tickets since 2020, and it's been great. I go to a couple of games a year. I sold the rest of the tickets, so I still have a few this year if anybody's interested.
Well, what games do you have available?
Well, the only ones that I don't have available right now are I've sold the Steelers versus Giants, the Cowboys, and the Ravens. So I have the other ones available if anybody's interested right now.
Okay,
Still available.
cool. Nice. Love that. So can I just say, I love other Steelers fans. Like I always say, I don't like saying like we're the best fan base, we're the this fan base, but there's something about talking to like another Steelers fan that just kind of gets you and you're like, you're me. We're the same. Like we get each other. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to say that. I appreciate that. So then and also I didn't say this at the beginning. I just want to say Daniel knows what questions I'm going to ask him. So this isn't like a gotcha moment where I'm like rattling off things that are just in my head. And if I do, I will tell him. So this is important for me so that I don't like when people are like, oh, he had no idea she was going to ask that. He knows what I'm going to ask him. So let's just FYI. So the next thing I want to know, or I'm interested to know, is since you've been creating content, what have been some of your favorite moments that you have gotten to create for the Steelers where you're like, ooh, I'm so glad I got to break this story, or I'm so glad I got to talk about this thing? Has anything stood out to you or it was like super exciting that moment happened that you got to actually create content around it?
Yeah, the first time when I first started creating content, it was right around the time of the 2021 draft. And so I believe that was when Kenny Pickett got drafted number one overall, or not number one overall,
Oh
first
gosh.
round for the Pittsburgh Steelers, 20th overall. And I wanted to go to training camp. I mean, it was exciting. I went to the draft party that year. So I got to see him, George Pickens, Marvin Leal, I believe. You know, those guys were there at the draft party, and I wanted to go and see the hype. You know, there was a quarterback competition that was supposedly going on between
Mhm.
Mitch Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, and Kenny Pickett, and I wanted to see who was winning that with my eyes only. So I got to go out there and cover a lot of the training camp stuff that was happening, and it really did help me propel my channel as well. You know, getting
Mm.
that firsthand videos of whether it was Kenny Pickett throwing a touchdown pass one way or the other, or Mason Rudolph doing the same, or Mitch Trubisky throwing an interception. It was all shared out there, and and so I got to see that firsthand, especially like with the hype around Kenny being, a first round quarterback. We hadn't seen him in a
Mhm.
Steelers uniform, things like that. So that by far has been probably my best experience, so to speak, as well. Because I'd never been to training camp, so I got to also
Yeah.
go up the sidewalk there and towards the actual dorm rooms and meet some of the
All
players
the
and things like
stuff.
that. Yeah, it was
That's
pretty cool.
cool. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've been to so many different teams' training camps. I've never been to the Steelers one. I'm
Mm,
weird when it comes to my teams. It's like I can watch everybody else, but when it comes to my team, I feel like I'm extra critical. And so I
mm.
try to like just stay out of the way. It's like my emotional maturity. I don't know if it's strong enough to be able to be around that because it doesn't always look good. It's practice. And so I find myself, I don't know how I would be. I'd be like worked up. So, well, I love that. And I love that you talked about three quarterbacks that are no longer with us anymore. So that just makes me happy as a reminder that those three guys are no longer with us.
Mhm.
So, gosh, I cannot believe we went through that. Anyways, that's a different conversation for a different day. So, what do you feel like your superpower is when it comes to creating content? Is there anything that you feel like that you do or that you bring to the table that is kind of like uniquely you?
Yeah, and I think it would have to do with probably the most successful videos that I've had, because those that I feel that I've done the best on have been the most successful videos. And those are when I'm breaking down film when it comes to the quarterback position. I'm not a coach or anything like that. I played high school football, so that's about the extent of my football knowledge to that point. I did play, Madden and things like that. But I am a football junkie, and I have studied the game, and I've watched um, different ways that plays are developed and things like that. So I've gone back and I've looked at a lot of tape throughout the last couple of years.
Okay.
And with that being said, I kind of called out some of the problems that the Steelers were having with Kenny Pickett come year one. I could tell that he was going to have some issues with the whole shot when teams were in cover two. I could see that he had a preference when it came to the slot receiver. If the inside line, or if the linebacker or the safety or whoever was covering that individual, if he slightly shaded onto the inside, that was going to be an out route, and it became very predictable. Now, I know a lot of people were thinking maybe perhaps that was Matt Canada, and I think that to a certain extent it was. But a lot of the problems he was having in the pros were some of the stuff that he was having in college. And so I was like, man, I don't know about that. And like I said, I'm not a fan of Matt Canada either.
I don't. Is any Steelers fan a fan of Matt Canada?
Right, exactly. But
Reveal yourself.
right, and I'm not trying to defend him or anything like that. But there were several occasions, even especially like early on this year, where against the Raiders, the Steelers ran a route. It was probably like a 3 or 4 yard route for George Pickens on the right side, and he had daylight in front of him. Kenny Pickett's looking at him, and all of a sudden he does this weird move. I think he's assuming there's pressure. There's nobody around him. He circles around. He ends up throwing a completed pass to Calvin Austin. And, I think it ends up going for a decent amount of yards. But had he hit George on the slot that was wide open, or on the slant that was wide open, that would have gone for 6. Yeah. So, I had seen a lot of those type of issues. And I was concerned. I mean, it went all the way back to the first year. I got a lot of heat by Steelers Nation, at the end, the first year of Kenny Pickett's, his first year with the Steelers, because I was very critical of his performance because I had seen a constant issue there. And so by the second year, people were a lot more different about what I was saying.
Yeah. I was on that too. I was like, first year, okay, I'll give him a break. Like I like his attitude. I like the fire he plays with. He had all the it's, right? He had like the Steelers it factor, what I call it. And then it just didn't quite translate consistently. So I hear you. And you're right. This fan base, if you call something out that makes us uncomfortable, there's 50% of us that will be like, oh no. And then there's the other ones that are like, okay, I could see that. So yeah. That's awesome. So what do you love most about being a content creator and being able to talk about a team that you actually like, that you support? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people that get into creating content and they find out it's just something they're good at. They're talking about something they could care less about, but it is what it is. How is it creating content for like your favorite team?
I find it extremely satisfying, and I think it makes me more successful because I'm so passionate about my team. I think that those that have made it in the business are because they are very passionate in the profession that they have selected. And so, for me, to cover the Steelers and what it means for me, it's also the opportunity. I've had the opportunities to perhaps talk to certain players here or there. On Steel Curtain Network, we do have a segment where it's called Our Source, and we have a source within the Pittsburgh Steelers organization who releases information to us for what they want out in the public. Now, I know who this is, and I know what they say. I'm a little bit skeptical sometimes about the information that's coming out. I tell the guys there, I'm like, hey, this is the information they want out. That's not necessarily mean it's true. I've been following the Steelers long enough to know it's watch what they do, not what they say.
Yes.
And so
oh my gosh, you are so I'm right there with you. That's how I knew we were going to get Justin Fields and Wilson, but that's a different conversation for a different day.
Well, I had known that Steelers were highly interested in Russ since I think right when the season ended almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I hope not. And I was seeing what Art Rooney was saying about Mason Rudolph, and I saw what Mason Rudolph was able to do at the end of last season.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that he was deserving of another opportunity. And I thought to myself, especially kind of looking at the last few years in Russ's career, that maybe the Steelers might have a better, chance with Mason. I didn't think that Justin Fields was going to happen until it did, to be honest with you. Well, let me put it this way. I thought the likelihood of Justin Fields being traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers was almost none after the signing of Russell Wilson. So I was extremely surprised.
So I thought the exact opposite. As
Mm.
soon as they got Wilson, I knew, because I knew what that meant for Kenny Pickett. I think when you look at situations and you see and you compare names, because that's all we can do, right? Is like kind of compare like what they come with in their names. I felt like Wilson made the Steelers safer for Fields because he could learn from him. He could figure it out. It almost, he didn't have to come in and be the guy right away. And he's leaving the Bears and they already have their own things with him. He gets to come to a place and he's almost safe. If Justin Fields isn't the starter, no one's going to say anything. He gets to kind of learn and develop, and not saying he doesn't want to be a starter. I think he wants to be a starter, but I just think right now it's a perfect situation for him. He gets to kind of ride on the radar. And we've already seen clips, day 2 or day 1 when Wilson didn't practice and he's like, throwing bombs down the field. He's going to get all the celebration. And then guess what? When Wilson's back, he gets to kind of fade back. It's perfect for him. And then if he takes Wilson's job, you know what else? We're going to love him. We're going to be like, that's our guy. Go Fields. So it's like, it's like win-win situation. I think that, now I'm off on a tangent, but I think one thing that as fans, I've realized we don't think about a lot is what a good situation some of these places are for the players, because they get to almost slide in there and make noise if they can, but if not, it's okay too, because there's already a guy that's there. So, we've already transitioned. So let's transition. Let's talk a little bit about our team. I am going to ask you a question I didn't have when I gave you the questions, but you'll be able to answer this. What are you thinking about George Pickens? I feel like George Pickens is a guy that we all know his capabilities. He's our, wide receiver 1. He's the guy. But I feel like we don't really hear about him as much because there's so much other things going on now with the quarterbacks. Obviously, that's a thing. And then obviously TJ Watt and Hayward, like certain guys are just going to get a lot of attention because of who they are. But I don't hear a lot about Pickens. So I would love to know just like, what are your thoughts about him this year? Like, are you looking for him to have a big season, or what are your thoughts about good old GP?
Well, I'll start off with the supposed news that kind of came out yesterday. The Steelers are pretty convinced that they're going to have a wide receiver 1 be acquired in a trade, whether it be Brandon Ayuk, Tyreek Hill was one that I was kind of surprised. yeah. And DK Metcalf, who has been working out with the Steelers.
I want him so bad.
Yeah. I would want one of those guys. I think I'd feel more comfortable with one of those guys as our wide receiver 1. Not saying that George Pickens can't be that wide receiver 1. I just feel that, George Pickens kind of fits a certain mold when it comes to what the Steelers offense has been over the last few years. Now, I know they have a new offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. So, the fundamentals of the offense might be different. But in the past, there's always been the taller, longer wide receiver, the deep threat, whether it be Plaxico Burress or Martavius Bryant. I felt that, George Pickens was probably in that realm. When it came to the opposite side of the field with the other wide receiver, I always thought of that being, the Deontay Johnson, the Antonio Brown, Santonio Holmes style wide receiver. And that's the one that, is the better in the routes, a little bit smoother, getting separation, kind of dependable with their hands. And to me, I think that would probably be the best fit for both of these guys if the Steelers can get a wide receiver 1 to pair across. Now, the only concern that I have is, it's been reported first day of training camp, George Pickens got into it with his wide receiver coach over his effort. Last season he got into it with another, coordinator or assistant coach on the sideline, at one of the games. He's going to have to, really turn around that attitude. Omar Khan has had no problems getting rid of Kevin Colbert's players that I think perhaps might have an attitude problem, going back to like Chase Claypool or any of the guys, even Kenny Pickett as of recent, who I strongly believe threw a fit at that Seattle game about Mason Rudolph starting and him not wanting to dress. And then we find out that he doesn't, want to compete with Russ for the position. And well, he's gone. So anybody that acts like that, they're gone. So I think he needs to have a little bit of an attitude adjustment.
Yeah.
I
Well, you
think
know
he's a
what's
great talent, but
yeah, I think so last year somebody asked me like because remember there was that one game, I think it was maybe against Cincinnati. I don't remember
Mhm.
which game it was where the effort was just like piss poor on
Yeah.
offense. And it was a combination of all things, right? It was a combination of like Pickens being Pickens, you know, Matt Canada being Matt Canada. We didn't look good. It just did none of it looked good. And our receivers were a little pouty. They
Mhm.
were a little bit like they didn't want to block. They just and people were like, "What do you think is wrong with them?" And I was like, "There's two things I know about this team that we don't have that we used to have. We don't have a tenured veteran leader on offense. We just didn't have it. We had Pickens who was young. We had uh, uh, Johnson who was young. We had Harris who's young. Our offensive line was young. Like there was nobody there that could be like, get it together. Like, what are you doing? You know, because our experience is on the defensive side of the ball. It's not on the offensive side of the ball. And so I watched all year just to see what would change if guys would kind of start to kind of get it together. And they did, but they still didn't have a veteran. So that's another reason why I was excited for Wilson to come in and say, let's go. Stop. You know, like act like a grown ass man, please. Like we don't have time for this. We're trying to win football games. So that's why like somebody like Matt Metcalf, I think he'd be perfect because he's a veteran. He could come in and show people how to work. And it sounds ridiculous, but it's something that I think happens in the NFL is these veteran guys teach these younger guys how to work, how to be a pro, how to, how to take snaps, how to brush off your coach being whatever, just keep going. So I'm interested to see what Khan does. Like at this point, Khan deserves a statue, but I got it. That's too premature. But let's see. It'll be interesting to see what happens come, game day, who actually is on the team.
Yeah, exactly. With DK Metcalf, the only I don't want to say an issue or anything like that is I think that him and George Pickens, aren't the same, but they play a similar role.
Mm.
The deep threat, big guy that's going to go up there and have the contested catch. I'm still looking for that Deontay Johnson, Antonio Brown, Santonio Holmes type player. Maybe the Steelers can get it out of Calvin Austin. There's been a lot of good things said about him so far in training camp and in the offseason during mini camp and OTAs. We'll see if that can transition into preseason and into the game when they start to actually put the pads on and he gets hit.
Yeah.
Given his smaller stature, that's the only question, right? But
Yeah.
I think he's gonna, if he ends up transitioning what he's been able to do so far into when it comes to pads, I think the Steelers are going to be okay in the wide receiver position.
Nice.
Now,
Okay.
now the fact that DK is reporting that the Steelers are pretty confident they're going to pick up one of these other wide receivers. I don't know. Maybe the confidence. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that confidence question. If there are advocacy or if they're trying to find somebody really, really badly, so to speak, that are willing to trade for something.
That makes sense. So when you look at this team, when you look at our history, when you look at really everything, what would success look like to you this year? I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious to know somebody else's thoughts.
Well, I think the bar's got to be high. And the reason being is I think that this team offensively and defensively is better than last year. And so last year, that team was able to get to the playoffs without a real offensive coordinator for majority of the season. Even after that, the guys that were filling in, it took two guys to kind of fill the position. So they still really didn't have an offensive coordinator throughout the entire year. And also the big question mark and the rotisserie, not the rotisserie, the rotation of the quarterback position. It wasn't until Mason Rudolph got in there that the Steelers got to see what their offense was capable of. And I think we also saw George Pickens' attitude change a little bit. There was a game against Baltimore there where he didn't get a single target, yet he was celebrating when they were scoring. He was blocking. He was doing the things he needed to do. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that they had now a quarterback that was able to deliver the ball and not be so predictable. And, over the last 3 games or 4 games, I don't know if you can count the last one in the playoffs, but the last 3 games, I believe Mason Rudolph had the highest quarterback rating. He had the best stats for any quarterback in the NFL. I truly believe that when it comes to this year, the Steelers have a better offensive line than what they did last season, given the
Oh
upgrade in
gosh.
the center position. If the
Mhm.
Steelers end up getting one of these premier wide receivers that are out there, that wide receiver group is definitely going to be in an upward trajectory, especially with last season. Deontay Johnson was out for quite a bit of the season with his own nagging, I think it was a hamstring injury. The tight end position is probably going to start to be utilized. So that's going to be an improvement to what we saw last season. And I expect that whoever's playing quarterback should play better with these weapons around him than what Mason Rudolph was able to do last season. So I anticipate this team to do very well. I think that they need to get to at least the divisional playoff game, if not to a championship, for it to be a successful season for me.
Yeah, we're pretty aligned there. So that's funny. So I love when that happens. It's like expectations are high because it should be. I
Mhm.
mean, that's how it goes. So I love that. What do you think people aren't talking about when it comes to the Steelers? I feel like we all know the talking points, right? The main things that people always talk about. But what is something, a thing or two, or if you can tell me one, that's fine too, that you are like, no one's talking about this thing. Like, and this is important, but no one's talking about it.
I would say that the improvements of the defense, and a lot of people are looking at the quarterback position. And I think that's what the mainstream media is also looking at. They want the sexy clips, right? Who's going to be
Mhm.
quarterback? What they're not talking about is how much better this defense is going to be as well. And last season, this defense was snake bitten, whether it was the entire middle linebacker position going down with injuries or the entire safety position also going down with injuries. Cam Hayward went down for majority of the season last year, and even when he was playing, wasn't himself. So I believe, or I expect Keanu Benton to have a big year. I think he showed a lot of promise last year. He's a guy that's
Spoiler
probably
pick.
flying under the radar right now. Keanu Benton,
Mhm.
Larry Ogunjobi, he's been practicing at training camps thus far. This is the first time that he's practiced in training camp in a few years, so it seems like his health is going in the right direction.
Okay.
Cam is going to be back. If he's 80% of what he was prior to all the injuries that he had, he's going to be a huge upgrade to what the Steelers had last season. And I think that Deshaun Elliott and Deontay Jackson are two guys that are probably not being talked enough. Also, Deshaun Elliott is that hard nosed hitting safety that is going to allow Minka Fitzpatrick to go back and do what he does best, and
Okay.
and create that splash. Pick off the quarterback, things like that. And when it comes to Deontay Jackson, Steelers have been interested in him for a long time. He had spoken about how, the Steelers were there at his pro day. They talked to him. He ended up getting drafted by Carolina, and I think in the second round before the Steelers were able to get him. During his tenure with the Carolina Panthers, the Steelers tried to trade for him, I believe, 2 times and went after him during his free agency year. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until this last year that they were finally able to do a deal where Deontay Johnson ended up going out there for Dante Jackson to come here. He's a
That
speedier
was the
guy.
most confusing trade I'd ever seen. I was
Yeah,
like, who and who? Like,
true.
wait, I'm like, what's going on? So, anyways.
Yeah, and I think he fits a specific role that the Steelers need, because last season the biggest issue, in my opinion, when it came to the secondary was speed.
I agree.
Levi
Yeah.
Wallace, he's not the
Everybody was
fastest
so
guy.
slow.
Yeah, everybody was slow. Dante Jackson was a 4.3 guy coming out of LSU. So we'll see how this transitions. I think now with all these players in positions, and I think the biggest surprise move that everybody's going to probably maybe not see coming unless you're a Steelers fan is Peyton Wilson. I think that guy's going to
Mm,
play a huge role. Maybe not to start the season, but by the time that the bye week happens and the Steelers start going into that stretch with AFC North games, I anticipate him to be a huge participant on the defense and being in a huge role as to why
I
the
love that.
defense is successful.
Isn't it great that we are the Pittsburgh Steelers and nobody's talking about our defense? Like
That is crazy.
I actually love it because it's like, don't talk about it. I'm one of those superstitious people, and this is just totally a me thing, that when big media starts talking about the Steelers, I'm like, great. Great. Now people are going to be paying attention. Like, don't pay attention. Just like let us like sneak in there and do our thing. So I appreciate you saying that because yeah, I agree. I think our defense Well, one of the things I give Mike Tomlin credit for is I remember last year, at one point I looked up and I was like, who the hell is playing linebacker this week? Like, who actually is even available to play linebacker this week? Because I honestly didn't know who was available. And then we go out there and we win. And I'm like, who are these guys? And it's no disrespect to any of them. It's just, it was so wild. There was nobody available that, nobody that I thought would be available that was available because everybody was hurt. So yeah, I mean, some of the things that he's able to pull off, I don't just are incredible because we just assume he's going to figure it out and he does. And we're like, of course he did. He's supposed to. But at the same time, it's like, it's incredible that that they're winning games sometimes when we don't even know who the guys are. We're like, what number was that? Oh, okay. Good job. Number 52. Like, good job. So, but my other question is there any games that you, besides the NFL screwing the Steelers with their schedule, but that's okay because we're going to be ready to go. Is there anybody that you're looking at the schedule and you're like, I'm excited to kind of see us play this game. I'm excited for this matchup. Or how do you feel about are there any matchups this year that you're like, okay, this will be interesting?
Well, the one that I'm going to right now, the game that I plan on attending is going to be the Steelers versus Ravens. I think it's a November game on a Sunday.
First one.
Yeah, the first one.
Okay.
I'm excited to go see that. I've been to quite a few games. I've never seen the Steelers versus Ravens. It's a rivalry game.
Oh, really?
So I'm excited for that. When it comes to the schedule, I'm not on the notion that the Steelers got that screwed on it. Does it look bad? Yeah. And I think that when it comes down to the schedule, the Steelers are going to play these teams regardless. It's just going to be determining in what order. Well, this offensive line is very new. Now, I anticipate Zach Frazier being the starting center, and I anticipate Fatuano being on the right side as the right tackle.
Okay.
It's going to take some time for these guys to gel and build that chemistry together, especially for James Daniels, who's in between those two guys. And so I think that the Steelers playing those less important games right off the bat to give time for this team to gel and get together is probably in their best benefit. That way, by the time that the bye comes, all the teams that they have afterwards, which are the important teams, those are the times where this team is hopefully, starting to make their stride or starting to run on all cylinders, so to speak, and start really making that push.
That's a different perspective. I appreciate that. It's kind of funny because I actually have chills hearing you say that, because one of the reasons why I like to have these conversations is to get other people's perspectives. Because when I look at the schedule, it didn't dawn on me. I've always said, I think I've made a video and I was like, or maybe, I don't know even know if it's been released, but that doesn't matter, is the Steelers historically get better as the year goes on. And that's just call it whatever you want. It's just a fact. And I was looking at it as, because we get better, it kind of sucks that when we get better, we're immediately getting tested in that regard. But what you're basically saying is we're going to be ready for that test because we will have played all these other things. And you're right. We do know what time it is. When you play AFC North football, you know what time it is. You know what you're getting. You know who you're playing. You match up the best with these teams against these teams. And somebody else that I talked to for the series said, and they also have to play us. We don't just have to play them. They also have to play us. And that was a good point too. And so I appreciate you saying that, because when I look at the schedule, first of all, I was like, is this a joke? And then I was like, okay, let me dial it back. And I think the thing that triggered me the most when I was looking at it is I feel like some of the teams that I think are going to be good this year, we happen to play them, which, like we have the Jets. And of course, if Aaron Rodgers, of course, I don't know what he has going on, but whatever, if he is whatever. And then, the Falcons are supposed to be good this year. And so the Raiders are supposed to kind of make an improvement. So again, we play them early. So maybe by the time we play them, and then it's the NFL. So the beginning of the season, we all say one thing. And then by week 7, we're like, okay, let's reassess all of our opinions that we've had for the past 4 months.
Right. For me, I think there's going to be growing pains regardless because of the young players. I'd rather those growing pains happen against NFC teams or teams that aren't in our division and, play their divisional teams while we've already surpassed those. And so that's the biggest key point for me.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, health is probably going to play a pivotal role, not just for the Steelers, but for the other teams as far as how
Mhm.
strong that schedule really is going to be come that time of year. Um, you know, I think I think the Steelers are going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough regardless. It's going to be a tough year. Was it the first hardest schedule in the year? I think that's what it was. So, and that was
Yeah,
before
and
the
it was
schedule came out.
yeah, and now if you depending on who you look or where you look, some places have it being like, they do that like Sharp, I can't think of his name, but how he does like the graph.
Mhm.
It's like there's the graphic and it's like the 31st team is here and like the Steelers they're like here. Like that's how tough it is kind of
Yeah.
compared to. And we all know what it is. It's that back end and it's that 10-day stretch where it's just you play AFC North, and then I think it's like Kansas City or the Eagles or something where it's like, all right, thank you, NFL. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the
We love
the
you
tough
too.
yeah, the toughest part of the schedule, in my opinion, is the fact that the two there's a Thursday game and a Wednesday game that the Pittsburgh Steelers play, and both of those games are preceded by games against Baltimore.
A bit, exactly.
So that's the one thing that I kind of was like, man, that could have been different.
I agree.
Not having that be the case. Now, the opposite teams or the opposing teams that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be playing are also going to be, on a short week or whatever the
Mhm.
case may be. I think the first one's against Baltimore, and I mean, not the Baltimore, but against the Browns, and it's in Cleveland. And the second one is against the Chiefs on Christmas night. So on Netflix too. So we're gonna have to go get a whole new
Yeah.
subscription if we don't have it already to see that one.
We're gonna Netflix and chill it. Well, yeah, and listen, at the end of the day, we are the Pittsburgh Steelers and we have Mike Tomlin, and our job is to go win games. And that is my expectation. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, it's probably going to be ugly. Yes, there could be probably 10 reasons why we shouldn't win, but I expect us to go win football games. That is who we are. And that's who we are. So go win football games. And I know for a fact Mike Tomlin doesn't give two fucks about what that schedule says. I know he's going to be telling the guys, let's go. Like, figure it out. I don't care. Leave your excuses before you enter this building because we got to go. And that gives me pride and confidence that we have to figure it out. So figure it out. Figure it out.
Exactly.
So there's my speech for the day. So I wanted to end this with like kind of a positive, like motivational thing. I'm on this cool self-reflection journey where I try to do this with myself every day. I'm trying to like give myself, just something to keep me going because I think most people in the world don't create content. So they don't know how hard it is sometimes, or the days where you're not feeling well, or you have a headache, or God forbid, it's freaking storming outside and you don't even have Wi-Fi or whatever the thing is that's happening, that it's harder to kind of get you going because of that. So I'm curious to know, when you're having one of those days, what is something that keeps you motivated and keeps you going, where you're like, you know what, I'm going to lean into this thing right now because that's the only way I can make this happen.
It's the viewers, like here recently, during it's quote unquote dead season, because in the month of July, there's not much, right? When the mandatory mini camp ends, and before training camp starts, there's no news. And if there is news, it's not usually the best news. If somebody's
Right.
getting hurt, somebody, or worse, or something happened, somebody got arrested, and you don't want to hear those things. So during those moments are probably the moments when you're watching the team where it's the most lowest, and when the team's not winning,
Mm.
but when the team's not winning, I kind of use this as like therapy to get my frustration out of and what I want to get off of my chest. So it helps me. So, I don't want to say almost, find those more enjoyable, but it's like I feel better after those because I got what I wanted to say off my chest. Now, after a Steelers victory, those are awesome. Don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
Everybody's cheering, everybody's joining, doing everything that they want to do, and I love it. And so I partake in those type of things. I actually broke a lamp by accident celebrating a touchdown once. The Steelers scored. I jumped up with, doing the touchdown sign, but it was right next to right next to my lamp. So my hand went into the lampshade and it somehow like got wrapped around my shoulder and it was crazy. But,
Got it.
you know, so for me, whether it's bad news or good news, I love creating content. It's when there's no news, right?
Okay.
But you have people that are asking you questions and they'll go into the comment section. And like, there'll be times where I'm drained and I don't have anything to do. And I'll get the comments like, hey, you're going to do a live this week. You're going to do a show this week. And I'm like, all right, I got to do it for you guys.
Yeah.
And so, the fans, they the viewers, they help me out. They get me through those more tougher times. I also do other podcasts as well that aren't very Steeler related. And those as well, like I said, just kind of talking to people and things like that, especially if things aren't, going through life. And so those help. I mean, the great thing about being a Steelers fan is you'll find that every Steelers fan around you is, you can relate on things. It's almost like talking with a family member after a couple of moments. And, whether you're talking about the game or what you do during the game or before the game, I get a lot of people that haven't been to Pittsburgh before. Steeler fans are everywhere. And so, they know that I'm touristy also because I've never lived in Pittsburgh. I've been to Pittsburgh multiple times, but I've never lived there. And so a lot of, people ask me like, hey, where do you go? Where do you eat? What do you do? And I love that interaction with the viewers as well, because, it's giving a little piece of me of where I go and what I do in Pittsburgh as well.
I like that. If you've never been to Pittsburgh and you are a Steelers fan, you have to get to Pittsburgh. Yeah. I'll be honest. I've been to Pittsburgh so many times. I'll even go in the off season because I've just been there so many times. I've experienced the football thing. But if you are a Steelers fan and you are listening to this, really, if you're a fan of any team, to be honest, and your team plays the Steelers, you have to go to Pittsburgh to just experience what football is like in a town like that. Especially because it's so crowded. It's just it. I don't know what else to say. It's just like you have to experience it. Walking across the bridge, getting to a game, you have to experience it. So if you have nothing on your bucket list and you need to add one more thing, I would add, and if you're going to the Ravens one for the first time ever, get there early. Yeah. And it's just like you become more of a fan once you have that experience. And so that's amazing. I think that's fantastic. I just have to say something. As I've been watching, doing this whole time, as I look at your background, all I want to sing is, here we go, Steelers, here we go. I don't know why, but there's something about your background that makes me feel that way. So thank you for making me feel that way. The whole time, every time, because I'm looking around and I'm seeing other things and I'm like, oh, it feels like home as I'm searching through the background and everything. So super random, but I needed to get that out so that I could stop thinking about it. So the last question I have for you, and then I'll just open it up for you if there's anything that you want to say or add, is what is something you would tell your younger self as it comes to the position you're in now? Because I would like to assume you probably didn't grow up or become an adult and go, I know exactly what I want to do. Or maybe you did, and you're kind of doing a variation of that. But what would you tell your younger self now that you have experienced a little bit more life? Let's just call it that.
Do it sooner. Don't wait. It was never anything or dream of mine or anything like that to be creating content. I've always loved the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've always indulged in content. It wasn't until, like I mentioned before, where I got on there with Dave Schofield and I got that little bit of an itch to do the podcasting. But I've always had an opinion about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think I feel like I've always had a little bit of an insight of what's going on. And, I should have probably done it sooner. I wish I could have done it sooner. I think, had I done it sooner, I would, one, be a lot better than I am now at it. And two, I'd have, a lot more of experiences. I could have gone to Pittsburgh a lot sooner. I could have met, a lot of the other players that I grew up watching. like Ben Roethlisberger, Jerome Bettis, so like
Yeah.
anybody like that. So, it would have been neat to have done those type of things, to have gotten involved in content creation at that time. So that way, by the time that I did get to, a point where I'm okay and good, and I could have maybe perhaps gone further, but there's no, there's no, you can't really dwell on things you can't change. So all I can do now is just try the best I can right now. So, but yeah, if I could tell anything for my younger self, it's just say, hey, just start doing it. Just do it, and
Yeah.
get out there. Even if you're not currently the best at it, nobody got on the microphone and was Joe Rogan day one. I mean, that
Right.
doesn't happen. And so, just get out there and learn from mistakes and grow and get better, and eventually, if you're truly passionate about your team, and being a content creator and talking about your team is something that you're considering doing, just do it. At the end of the day, if you look back at it and you look at what you're doing and you tell yourself, hey, I'm not sure this is for me, at least at least you tried. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I respect that. It's so interesting too, because, and I think I said this somewhere else, but we're all very different, but to our core of us, we're all kind of the same. Like, we all can kind of take the same things and apply them to different situations, because we all, there's been things I wish I would have done them and I didn't. And so now when I say that, I'm like, oh, I could. I'm like, no, you're going to, because you remember the last time you said this, you didn't do it. And then you wish you would have. So I appreciate that. And as we close out here, is there anything else that maybe you want to mention, maybe that we didn't talk about, that I didn't ask about, that you want to share, or that you want to mention?
Well, I got a question. When you go to
Yeah.
Pittsburgh, as you say you go often, what pizza do you get? It's a very Italian city, so pizza's a big thing there. Where do you go to get your pizza at there in Pittsburgh?
So I stay at the Renaissance.
Uh-huh.
And so there, I believe I can't think of what that little shop is called. There literally like 20 steps. That's a place I go to,
Uh-huh.
and I will eat there every day. So I'll go there and I'll get a pizza one day. I'll go there and I'll get spaghetti another day. Like, that's the place I go to because it's so close.
Mhm.
And I could not think of what it's called. Of course, like, I'm on the spot and I can't think of what it's called, but it's literally 20 steps away from the Renaissance entrance.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, if you ever want to like venture out, my recommendation is always Fiore's. I love
Hmm,
Fiore's. It's
okay.
you walk in there, there's pictures of some of the football players and some of the folks that have actually gone and eaten there. Uh, I got the recommendation from Omar Khan. So
Nice.
not to me
Okay.
directly, not to me
Well,
directly. It was on a show he
yeah.
was doing an interview
Well,
with. So.
listen, at this point, he could maybe tell me to do something crazy, and I might be like, you know what? I'll try it. Like, just why not?
Exactly.
So yeah, I love that. The thing I've learned too is every time I go to Pittsburgh, I'm doing different things. The hotel I stay at and the little Italian place that's in walking distance are my two consistent things. Everything
Mhm.
else, I can't call it, because I secretly want to live there and get a condo in downtown Pittsburgh for football season,
Mhm.
life. But that's what I would love to do. And just, like, have that experience, and know I will get to experience it at least a few times a year. But
Yeah.
that's a different, yeah. But,
Yeah. I'm a
drinks.
I'm an outskirts kind of guy in the middle of the country, and Latrobe. If you haven't been to Latrobe, it is beautiful out there.
Okay.
I recommend going out there. It's a little humid in the summer, like right now. If you're out there
Mm.
watching the Steelers during training camp, you know what I'm talking about. Get underneath the trees because that's
Yeah,
going
I
to be
need
your
to
best
go
spot.
out there. I every year I'm like, maybe, but I need to go out there and just experience it. I always say I'm going to, and every year rolls around, I'm like, well, maybe next year. One year I'm going to just do it, and I'm just going to suck it up and get my crap together. Are there hotels out there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I stayed at a, was it like a Wyndham or something like that? That was
Okay.
probably about 25 minutes away or so. I'm sure there are Airbnbs and stuff that are closer.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an awesome place. It really is. The scenery is awesome. for me, the temperature is awesome because I'm from Texas. So
Yeah.
going out there from
Hot
here,
as hell here.
yeah, exactly.
Although
Uh,
lately it hasn't been, but that's been an interesting thing.
just the last few days, but
Well, the
and
rain is
normally,
throwing me off. I'm like,
yeah,
what is this particle coming from the sky in July? That's not that's not
it's not
normal.
unusual. Yeah. And so, for me, it's usually a little break from the heat, but it is a lot more humid out there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, no, I love that place. I love that being out there. I tell the same thing to my wife. I'm like, hey, we need to one day we're gonna move out here at least for 6 months during the season or something, and try to see every game or do something crazy
Yeah.
one time into my life.
Well, listen, yeah, same. Like anyways, it'll be one of those things that when it happens, I'll be that person and then I'll tell somebody else, this was my dream for 25 years. And that will motivate them to do it on their, you know how it goes. Like it's like
Mhm.
pass off your dreams to other people because they have similar dreams as well. So but anyways, I appreciate you getting back to me, responding back to me. This is our first conversation ever. So I also, to the core of me, I'm an educator. I teach college. I think that there's something about human connection that sometimes goes missing and that we don't always celebrate and embrace like we should. So I just appreciate you being willing to talk to me. And you didn't know me from a hole in the wall. So I just appreciate you just like saying, yeah, and saying, let's do this and let's have fun with this. Let's make this happen. So thank you for being gracious to me, being gracious with your time, being supportive of, what I'm trying to do as well. So I appreciate that. And it makes me happy knowing that there's still people in this world that are like, absolutely, like, why not? Let's do this
Yeah.
thing. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I've been there, starting off, and I got fortunate that I had some guys that joined up as well and did some collabs and kind of got me going. So I'm always there for anybody who wants to hang out and talk some Steeler football. Just hit me up.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
okay. And I have to end with "Here We Go" because I just can't. I might start singing if I don't end this. No, I'm just kidding. I won't.
Nice.